Most of the e-bikes with a hub motor have this weakness. And if you have one and you love it and it stopped working, maybe this is the best solution for you. This is a video that I've done a couple of years back, but it's still very relevant today. After I replaced 2 hub motors on this Himiway bike, which I absolutely love, this was one of the most fun part of my life, I've decided I gotta do something about it, make it more reliable. And even though it was the hard way to do it, I found a controller that works sensorless and changed the internals of the motor to accommodate that. It's a little bit more of a complicated video, but it's well worth it because since then, that bike never stopped running. Here's the video that I've created a couple of years back. Before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe because if you don't do it now, you're gonna forget towards the end. And yes, you have to change the controller also. I'm gonna put a link at the bottom of the video for the controller that I've used for this video. It's a sensorless controller. That's an easy swap. It comes in a kit with everything that you need. Basically, you're modifying a non-functional bike, because I assume you're watching this video because your bike doesn't work, to a bike that is a lot more reliable with a sensorless controller. And with the hub motor converted to sensorless, then you're gonna have a much more reliable bike. Also, I wanna mention that you could use the motor without converting it with a sensorless controller because the controller works sensored or sensorless. But in this video, I've converted it to sensorless because I wanted to give it a little bit more thicker cables to be able to get more amps in it. This is a Himiway Bafang motor, and I'm going to convert it today from sensored to sensorless. And I'm going to explain why would I do that, because this is a functional motor. There's no problem with it. But I have very, very good reasons to do it. Here's the first reason. The connector over here at the end, you cannot change the cassette here in the back because the connector is too big and you cannot fit a key. This is the normal Shimano key and then it just doesn't fit over it. So you have to cut the cable every time you want to do that. Even the nut, if you cross-thread it, you have to do that because you can run it over the connector. Another reason that I'm doing that is because you have the 9 wires over here, what happens is that they have to skimp or the thickness of the wire that goes into the motor. So this harness gets very, very hot, very, very hot, and it melts. And when it melts, it makes a short, and then you're left in the middle of nowhere with it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna save the space that the 6 little wire take for communication, and I'm gonna add 3 thick copper wires only. How is that gonna affect the motor? Well, not that much. It's gonna run a little bit rougher, but then it's gonna be a lot more reliable. So that's the whole point of it. Also, these motors are prone to failure for the sensors inside the motor. And if you have a controller that cannot run them with sensorless, then you have a big problem. These are called Hall sensors, and what they do is they read the positioning of the motor and they communicate it back to the controller if it's a sensored controller. It makes the motor run a little bit not as rough, but then they have the tendency to overheat and burn, and then once they cannot be read by the motor anymore, then they just cause problems. So even though this one is good, I've tested it, I'm just gonna get rid of them. Also, another problem that I have with this Bafang Himiway motor is that this connector overheats and it just melted together. So I'm just gonna get rid of another problem that could occur. Basically what I'm gonna do, even though I just fixed this one recently, I've decided after that I don't want it. So I'm gonna cut these zip ties out. Be able to fit them all through this little hole over here. What they had to do is they had to skimp on insulation on them. So as soon as they overheat a little bit, they melt and they short in the side, and then you have a problem. You see even here, it's already melting out and it's just touching other stuff in there. So I'm gonna replace them with copper wires, not metal wires. They're also metal wires. So I'm gonna replace them with copper wires, which are better conductivity, and they're solid core, which makes them thinner, more powerful. They were rated for 25 amps. So here it is, we're cutting this board out. Yeah, I had enough with this thing. It's keep breaking and there's really no reason for it. And with the wire out, now we have access to the tool that goes and takes this sprocket out so we could put a bigger sprocket on. So this is a perfect example. Why am I doing this? You see these wires? They melted together inside the harness. So basically they would have been one step away from a short. The harness from the blue cable basically went into the yellow and just melted together. Also, we don't need this piece of plastic over here, so we're gonna take this plastic out. So these are the wires that I'm gonna use. These are 12 gauge. I wish I had them in different colors, but I don't, so I'm gonna have to mark one of these, so make sure that I know which one goes where. Here they are, they went in. This is the absolute maximum gauge that you could fit through this connector over here. There's no more room over there. And especially here at the bottom, where it's like a little bit of a turn, this is the maximum gauge that you could fit in. So 12 gauge copper core, this should do it. Finally, I managed to put everything together. These are compression connectors. I've chose compression connectors because it's very, very hard to connect solid with split wires. So
This works really, really well. And there they are side by side. This is the one that sensors failed also. So this is the second motor that the sensors failed on it. So here's the final product. It works great. Twist the throttle and there it is.